Well, Happy New Year, everyone. So here we are at the very beginning of the year 2025. I hope you had a wonderful New Year's celebration, at least as it is in this part of the world. I hope you feel rested and ready to tackle this new year. I thought it would be a good time because it is the new year to talk about couple goals. Now, this is something I actually really recommend at the end of 2024, the end of each year that couples do. But I think the beginning of a year is just fine to be able to do it then as well. And that is, what do we want to accomplish this year as a couple? What is important for us to be able to accomplish that improves our relationship, that works on our relationship, that moves us in the right direction? And so just like any business, they would never go into the following year and say, you know what, let's not really worry about strategy this year. Let's just kind of wing it. I don't believe that couples should do that either. I really think they should sit down and talk about some goals they want to accomplish for the relationship each and every year together. So in this episode, that's what we're going to do. We're going to talk about how to set goals as a couple for the coming year. Welcome to Trauma-Free Relationship. I'm Tom Philp, your host. And as a therapist, I've spent over 10,000 hours helping couples work through their trauma so they can repair ruptures, heal their wounds, and communicate from a place of wholeness and connection. Let's get started. Okay, as I mentioned, we're going to talk about goals and goal setting as a couple for the new year. This is something, as I said in the opening, that I really encourage a lot of couples do. I think it's important to know, what do we want to accomplish? And so I've got a little schematic we're going to walk through today that's going to help us talk about how to set goals as a couple. And so these are not sort of resolutions. I want us to get away from thinking that somehow this is like our New Year's resolutions where, I want to exercise more and eat less or learn an instrument or things that might quickly fade in the face of day-to-day challenges. That's not what we're talking about here. I'm talking about sitting down as a couple and going through something a little more in depth about not only what we want to accomplish as a couple this year, but how we tend to accomplish that. And so I think that's really important for us to do that. And part of the reason is because when we set goals as a couple, it forces us to get on the same page as a couple. And I think that's really important, just like I really encourage couples to tackle their finances together. Now, I know some couples have separate bank accounts. They have separate incomes, and that works for them, and I understand that. But I think there's something extremely powerful in couples being able to combine their money and manage their money together. It forces them to work together to accomplish their goals, and it forces them to have to be able to communicate those goals together and align those goals with each other's behavior so they can accomplish them together. This is a little bit in the same regard. So we're going to dig in here, and the first thing we're going to talk about really is starting with our core values. Now, that sounds a little strange, doesn't it? But this is really important because what happens is oftentimes couples have these goals that aren't aligned with their core values as a family. And so I'm not necessarily talking about just the kids, but it could certainly include the kids as well. So the first thing I want you to look at is, what are your core values as a family? Now, I'm not talking about morals and ethics, how we treat ourselves and other people, but I'm talking about what are those things that we value the most in our family. And oftentimes what you can do is you can look at how you spend your time and your money. That really tells you what it is you value in your family. And so if you look back over, let's say, your bank account for the past year, what did you spend your money on? Did you spend your money on travel? Did you spend your money on certain experiences, whether it be the theater or whether it be sporting events or something like that? Or maybe it was outdoor activities. Maybe you invested a lot in camping equipment. I know a family of ours, good friends, they love to go camping. And so they invested in one of these tent-like Kajabis that sort of sit on top of your car, but then you can quickly unfold an entire family tent next to it. And so that was like worth the investment for them, because they love to go out, and when they do, they can just throw that on the top of the car. They've got it set so they can unfold their tent really easily, and as a result, that's part of how they invested in their values. So that's kind of an example. But I think it's really important to have a conversation with your partner saying, what is it that we really value? What is it that we spend our time and our money on? So here are some questions for you to ponder that can help you decide what it is that you spend your time and money on. So question number 1, what do you enjoy doing most in your free time? Now, I'm talking about as a couple here, not just individually. You may have your Tuesday night bowling league, and that's great, but if you're not doing that as a couple, that's more of an individual activity. And so that's not really what I'm trying to get at. I want you to think about, what do we spend our time on and enjoy doing in our free time as a couple or as a family? Again, maybe it's hiking. Maybe it's outdoor activities. Maybe it's travel. Some couples love to travel. I know I have some clients that have traveled all over the world, just the two of them. And that's part of how they really explore each other and explore the world, is to go and travel these different places. They work really hard. They save up. They go take a trip. And it's beautiful. They love it. So question number 2, if I had all the money in the world, what would I spend it on? So if finances weren't limited in any way, what would you actually spend your money on? What would you spend your money towards? What would you do with your money that you wouldn't do now? Would you open up a nonprofit because there's some need in your community that both you and your partner are really passionate about? Maybe it's something like that. Number 3, if I had more free time, what would I do? Again, what would we do as a couple if we had more free time? Someday you might have that free time. Someday you might get to a place where you retire. And the question is, what are we going to do with that time? How are we going to spend that time as a couple? Hopefully we're not going to just do our separate things, although all healthy couples have separate things that they do. I don't mean to imply that we don't. But I think it's important to also understand, what are we doing as a couple together with our time? So number 4, looking over the past year, what did I spend and we spend most of our time and money on? So if we were to look back over the past year, where did we spend our time and money, as I've mentioned before? Number 5, something I wish we could do together is blank. Fill in that blank. Maybe it's something that just hit you right now off the top of your head. A visual or image or words came to mind that said, yeah, boy, something I wish we could do together is, fill that in. Number 6, I have always wanted to try blank. Windsurfing, paragliding, parachuting, jumping out of a perfectly good plane. I've always wanted to try, climbing Mount Kilimanjaro. I've always wanted to learn an instrument. I've always wanted to, invest in the market. And I'd love to do that with my partner because we're very money driven. We both like to make money. We like to manage money. That would be something so fun for us to do, to have an account and to look at our trades and do those trades every day and work together to build that. That could be a fun thing to do. Whatever. I'm just spitballing here, but you get the idea. Number 7, blank is so important to us that I can't compromise it. What would that be? What is so important to you all as a family that you couldn't compromise in any way not doing it. Number 8, what change would we like to see in the world? What can we make an impact as a couple? Is there something we're passionate about? Is there a need in our community, in our house of worship, in our friend group that has come up that we just feel really passionate about it? And man, given the time, given the money, we would so do that. Number 9, what is the purpose of our money? For some people, the purpose is to give a vast majority of it away. For some people, the purpose of it is to try to pass it along to their next generation, to their kids or their kids' kids. To some, it is to spend it all and have a great time and completely enjoy everything they can that life has to give them with their money. But I think that's a really important conversation to have your partner. What is the purpose of our money? If we work really hard for our money, what is the purpose of it? How do we see our relationship with that money? Number 10, how do we want to be remembered as a couple? When people look back at us, our time together, how do we want to be remembered? Do we want to be remembered as a couple that was adventurous, a couple that was able to give back, to help others, a couple that volunteered, that cared, that helped others, a couple that created something that was fulfilled a need that was not in the world before? So there's lots of ways to be remembered. And remember, I'm talking about values here. So in no way do I think there's a right or wrong set of values with, now that I'm saying that off the top of my head, with the exception of we don't want to do anything that hurts somebody else. Okay? We don't want to be remembered as a couple that damaged other people or hurt other people in some way. But you get the idea. What is it that we value, that we spend our time and our money on? And if we had an abundance of that, what would we do with that we can look at and go, oh yeah, that makes perfect sense. This is what we believe. So with that being said, let me share a little bit about my family. So there's a couple of things we really value in our family that we've invested a lot of time and money in. First of all, music is really big in our family. Both my boys play instruments, and so we've invested in lessons for them. We've invested in a little music studio in the house for them. We played music as a family. We share music together. There's always music playing. My wife and I met through music. So we love and are passionate about music. Now, none of us are professional musicians, don't get me wrong, but it is something that we really value, and we've invested our time and our money in that value. Another thing is we love camping. We love outdoors. And so we've invested a lot of time and money and equipment in hiking, in camping, in doing outdoor activities as well. And so those are just two values that I can look back and easily go, oh yeah, those are things that we have spent our time and our money on because we highly value those in our family. And those are very important. So once you have those down, once you have your values down, then what I want you to do is I want you to sort of write down those values in a shared values list. And as you're discussing these with your partner, you can just simply go and write down on a sheet of paper what it is you agree on. What are those shared values that both of you agree on that is very clear and evident, that is sort of embedded in your relationship and is a part of who you all are as a couple. Some of this is just a great exercise in self-reflection. Okay, we've been together 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, 35 years, however long. When we look back, boy, what is it we've really valued as a couple? Do we value growing this business we started together? Do we value the volunteer work we do? What are those values that really come to light given what we know about each other and where we spend our time and our money? Okay, the next thing I want you to do is I want you to consider different types of goals. So as a couple, there's different buckets that we can create goals in. So here's just some general buckets you can create goals around. The first one may be sort of spiritual or personal growth goals. Should we start, going to our house of worship again? Should we pray or meditate more? Should we hike more? Should we read more self-help books? Take classes at a local community? What can we do together to grow individually, but also as a couple? Maybe we should go to that marriage seminar we've been talking about so long. Maybe we should go to therapy because we've really been talking about that. We could use some fine-tuning in our communication. Maybe that would be a good goal for us this year to be able to do. Secondly, what about like fitness goals? How can we eat more healthy, exercise more? Should we join that gym we've been talking about for so long? Should we take more walks or runs together? Finally, friends. How can we spend more time with our friends? How can we have more diverse friends? How can we go out with our friends and or host more if we'd like to host more, for sure. So not only separately, because I do think it's important for couples to have, the male might have the buddies that he goes to golf with occasionally. The female might have friends that she goes and does things with as well. And so having those separate friend groups is important in the life of the relationship, and I believe that. But I also believe it's really important to have couple friends, other couples that are in roughly the same stage of life you are. There's nothing more soothing than to be able to sit around with other couples and talk about the particular stage of life you're in, whether that be raising kids at a certain age, whether they're little bitties, elementary age, or whether they're teenagers and the struggles around those years, or whether we're talking about our kids and their careers and what they've become. There's nothing more fun, I think, and nothing builds more camaraderie than being able to discuss the phase of life we're in. So having other couple friends is really important as well. What about family? Get kids involved in activities such as more play dates or having more play dates for other kids. Visiting your extended family more. Maybe you have an aunt or a grandmother that is getting up in years or getting older. How can you go visit them and spend more quality time with them before that time runs out? Maybe that's important to do now as a couple. What about romance? So how can we spark more romance in our relationship? Date nights, couple workshops. As I said, maybe some books together. Maybe increasing our physical intimacy. Now that means sexual as well as non-sexual intimacy. How can we start kissing hello and goodbye at the beginning and the end of the day? How can we just sit on the couch together and hold hands or put my arm around you more? Just letting you know through non-sexual touch that I love you, that I care about you, especially if that's a particular love language of an individual. So, and obviously, how could we increase our sexual activity more in a way that works for both of us? And then so finally, the last bucket I want to talk about is the financial bucket, right? So how can we focus on our jobs, careers? How can we support each other in our advancement of our careers? Or is it time to launch that business that we've been talking about? How can we get on the same page about saving more money or making more money or paying down our debt together? Or there's something we really want to purchase. We want to take that trip to Europe, or we want to take that trip to North America, or wherever it is you're listening from. How can we start saving for that? Because that's a bucket list of ours, and we really want to do that before we get too old. So those are just some general areas in which you can create goals for yourself. Lastly, the thing I want you to do is build that plan together. And we've all heard of SMART plans. So SMART plans are simply plans that are specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. And so you can build just a little bit of a graph for yourself, and maybe you have 5 columns and you have a category, you have goals, you have key tasks, end date, and then you can have results. And so maybe you make goals for each one of these buckets that I talked about: spiritual, personal growth goals, fitness goals, friends goals, families goals, romance goals, finance goals. And then you simply just list the goal. You can list the task. What do we need to do to get there, to achieve this goal? What is our end date? Remember, it has to be realistic and timely. And then finally, can we measure our results? How do we know we're getting closer to our goal? If our goal is to travel more and we're going to create a travel budget for ourselves, how much money do we need to put in that budget in order to be able to take that trip next summer together? So it needs to be specific and measurable. But these are things that you can work on together. Remember, having a set of goals that align with your common core values is how couples actually stay strong, healthy together. So I hope this was helpful and gave you an idea as we launch into the new year for how to create some goals together. These are different than, say, your resolutions that you make each year. I'm not a big believer in resolutions, mostly because people don't follow them. But I do think it's important to sit down and have a state of the union address, so to speak. Let's have a state of our relationship. How are we doing? What do we need to work on? What can we achieve or accomplish, or where do we want to go this year? And if we follow this template, the feedback I've gotten is this is a good template, and a lot of couples like this because it's not just throwing out a bunch of goals, but it's actually aligning those goals with our values and then creating measurable tasks and achievements across various areas of our lives to be able to accomplish them. Well, thank you so much for listening. Once again, I thank you so much for last year. It was absolutely incredible, the feedback I've been getting, and I really love hearing from you guys. So as we launch into a whole nother year of this podcast in 2025, I'm happy to say we're going to keep bringing more episodes to you each week, and I'll do this as long as I possibly can. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.
Thank you for listening to Trauma Free Relationship, a podcast for the healing of attachment trauma. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, or our website at traumafreerelationship.com. Be sure to look for our next episode on your favorite streaming service.